Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video from Soulful Narratives, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Samantha Evans had never felt more powerful or more broken than she did in this moment. Standing in the doorway of courtroom 3A, she watched her soon-to-be ex-husband, Daniel Whitmore, crumble as the judge's final words echoed through the air. The defendant's petition is denied. Miss Evans retains full ownership of her law practice, her assets, and her dignity. Her dignity. The judge had actually said that. The click of her designer heels, the last expensive gift Daniel had given her before she discovered his betrayal, rang out like gunshots against the marble courthouse floor. Each step through the grand hallway was a declaration, each breath a victory song. She had walked into this building as a woman destroyed by lies, and was walking out as a queen reclaiming her throne. Victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, it tasted like tears she refused to shed and dreams she'd never get back. Samantha! Wait! Daniel's voice cut through the courthouse chatter, desperation bleeding through his usual arrogance. She turned slowly, her dark eyes meeting his for what she hoped would be the last time. Even now, after everything, he was still handsome in that privileged way that had first attracted her. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident smile that money could buy. Behind him, the Whitmore family stood in their expensive suits, whispering threats about appeals and revenge. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, with her perfectly styled silver hair and cold blue eyes, was already on her phone, no doubt summoning their army of lawyers. The Whitmore family had money, connections, and a legacy of destroying anyone who dared challenge them. But Samantha possessed something they couldn't comprehend. She had survived poverty, discrimination, and abandonment. She was a queen who had built her own kingdom from nothing, and no one would strip that from her. "There's nothing left to say, Daniel," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The judge made it clear. "The law practice is mine, the house is mine, and my dignity is mine to keep. You can't seriously think you'll survive without my family's support," he sneered, stepping closer. His designer cologne, the same scent that once made her heart race, now churned her stomach. "You're nothing without us, Samantha. Nothing but a project girl who got lucky." The words struck her like physical blows, each one calculated to shatter the confidence she'd built over years of fighting for her place in a world that had never welcomed her. But Samantha had endured worse. She'd survived worse. "I was never nothing, Daniel. I was simply naive enough to believe that love could overcome the venom in your heart." She turned away from him, her spine straight, her chin elevated like the queen she'd always been. "Goodbye, Daniel. May you find whatever hollow satisfaction you're truly seeking." She walked away with purpose, her heels clicking against the marble as she headed for the courthouse exit. The weight of the last 2 years finally began to settle on her shoulders. The sleepless nights preparing for court. The humiliation of discovering Daniel's affairs with his secretary, his tennis instructor, and God knew who else. The heartbreak of realizing that his family had seen her as nothing more than temporary entertainment. The autumn Denver air hit her face as she stepped outside, crisp and cold against her skin. She had parked 6 blocks away, too proud to pay for courthouse parking, too broke after legal fees to afford the luxury. Her savings were depleted, her practice barely surviving, and her heart was shattered into pieces she wasn't sure she could ever put back together. She made it halfway down the courthouse steps when her legs began to shake. The adrenaline that had carried her through the hearing was fading, replaced by an exhaustion so deep it seemed to reach her bones. She gripped the cold metal railing, trying to steady herself, but the world began to tilt and spin. I can't," she whispered to herself, her breath coming in short gasps. The stress, the lack of sleep, the emotional toll of the divorcee, all hit her at once like a freight train. She hadn't eaten in 12 hours, hadn't slept properly in weeks. Her body was shutting down. Her knees buckled, and she felt herself falling toward the concrete steps. This was it. She was going to collapse on the courthouse steps like some tragic figure, giving Daniel and his family one final moment of satisfaction. But instead of hitting cold concrete, she found herself caught in strong, warm arms. The scent of honest work and clean soap filled her nostrils as she was lifted effortlessly against a broad chest. Through her blurred vision, she saw eyes the color of a stormy sky looking down at her with genuine concern. "I've got you," a deep voice murmured, and something in those 3 words made her feel safer than she had in months. "You're okay. I've got you." Samantha tried to focus on her rescuer's face, but her vision was swimming. She could make out strong features, light brown hair, and those incredible eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. He was wearing work clothes, a flannel shirt and jeans, and his hands bore the calluses of honest labor. "My sister went through something similar," he said quietly. His voice meant only for her. "Divorce court. I was here for her hearing. Saw you come out of the other courtroom. You looked like you were carrying the weight of the world. Call an ambulance," he shouted to someone nearby, his voice carrying authority that cut through the courthouse crowd. "She needs medical attention." "No," Samantha tried to protest, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine. You need to be checked out," he said firmly, settling her more comfortably in his arms. She realized he was kneeling on the steps, holding her against his chest like she weighed nothing. "You scared me when you started to fall." There was something about the way he said "scared me" that made her heart flutter despite her exhaustion. This stranger was looking at her like she mattered, like her well-being was important to him. When was the last time someone had looked at her that way? The sound of sirens filled the air, and Samantha realized a crowd had gathered, faces staring down at her. She saw Daniel pushing through, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to something that might have been concern. "Samantha, what happened?" Daniel demanded, but her rescuer's arms tightened around her protectively. "Step back," the stranger said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge that made Samantha's pulse quicken. "Give her space to breathe." When the paramedics arrived, Samantha expected her rescuer to hand her over and disappear into the crowd. Instead, he stood up with her still in his arms, his jaw set with determination. "I'm riding with her," he announced to the paramedics, his tone brooking no argument. "Are you family?" one of the EMTs asked, already preparing the gurney. Samantha felt her rescuer's arms tighten around her, his chest rising and falling with a deep breath. In that moment, with her world spinning and her heart breaking, she looked up into those stormy eyes and saw something that took her breath away. A man who cared about her well-being more than Daniel ever had. "She's my wife," he said, his voice carrying such conviction that even Samantha almost believed it. The words hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Daniel's face went white, his mother gasped audibly, and Samantha felt her heart skip a beat. This stranger, this beautiful, gentle stranger, was claiming her as his own. "Your wife?" Daniel sputtered, his voice cracking with disbelief. Her rescuer looked directly at Daniel, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "That's right, my wife. And if you don't step back and let the paramedics do their job, we're going to have a problem." As Samantha was loaded onto the gurney, she caught Daniel's expression. Shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like regret. For the first time since she'd known him, Daniel looked like a man who was realizing he'd lost something precious. The last thing she saw before the ambulance doors closed was her mysterious rescuer climbing in beside her, his hand gently taking hers, his eyes never leaving her face. In that moment, as the sirens began to wail and they pulled away from the courthouse, Samantha felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like a queen being rescued by her king. And somewhere in the crowd behind them, Daniel watched the ambulance disappear, finally understanding that he had lost the most incredible woman he'd ever known to a man who had claimed her as his own in less than 5 minutes. The queen had fallen, but she hadn't fallen alone. Chapter 2. The Protector's Heart. Samantha woke to the sound of rain against hospital windows and the gentle murmur of a voice she didn't recognize, but somehow trusted completely. "And I told them that the carburetor was shot, but they insisted on trying to fix it themselves. 3 hours later, they're calling me back, begging me to come rescue them." She kept her eyes closed, listening to the warm laughter in that voice, the same voice that had promised her safety when her world was falling apart, the same voice that had claimed her as his wife. "You're awake," he said softly. And she could hear the smile in his words. "I can tell by the way your breathing changed." Samantha opened her eyes slowly, preparing herself for the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room. Instead, she found herself looking into those same stormy blue eyes that had caught her when she fell. He was sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair beside her bed, his large frame somehow folded into the small space, his attention completely focused on her. "Hi," she whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Hi yourself," he replied, and the gentleness in his tone made her heart flutter. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was hit by a truck," she admitted, trying to sit up. Immediately, he was on his feet, helping her adjust the hospital bed, his hands careful and warm against her arms. "The doctor said you were dehydrated and exhausted. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" Samantha thought about it and realized she couldn't remember. "I don't know. Maybe 2 days ago." His jaw tightened, and she saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "2 days. Jesus, Samantha. You know my name?" she said, surprised. "I asked the nurses. I hope that's okay." He settled back into his chair, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm Nathan. Nathan Brooks." "Nathan," she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her tongue. "Thank you for everything. You didn't have to stay." "Yes, I did." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "Someone needed to make sure you were okay. But you told them I was your wife." The words hung in the air between them, and Samantha felt her cheeks warm. "Why did you do that?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. "Because you looked like you needed someone to claim you, to protect you." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "And because that bastard ex-husband of yours was looking at you like you were something he could throw away." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her breath catch. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I know you're a lawyer who just won a difficult case. I know you're strong enough to walk out of that courthouse with your head held high, even when you were falling apart inside. I know you're beautiful enough to stop traffic, and I know that any man who would hurt you is a fool." Samantha felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't understand. I'm not someone men fight for. I'm not someone men claim. Then you've been meeting the wrong men." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, this gentle giant in work clothes and worn boots, and felt something shift inside her chest. "I should go," she said suddenly, throwing back the hospital blanket. "I have work to do, bills to pay." "Whoa, hold on." Nathan was on his feet again, his hands gentle but firm on her shoulders. "The doctor wants to keep you overnight for observation. You can't just walk out of here." "I can't afford to stay overnight," Samantha said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't have insurance that covers this, and I just spent everything I had on legal fees." Nathan's expression softened, and he sat on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and masculine that made her want to lean into him. "Don't worry about that," he said quietly. "I'll take care of it." "No." Samantha shook her head firmly. "I don't accept charity. I don't accept handouts. I've been taking care of myself since I was 16, and I'm not going to stop now." "It's not charity," Nathan said, his voice patient. "It's what someone does when they care about another person. You don't know me well enough to care about me." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "Maybe not, but I'd like to, if you'll let me." Before Samantha could respond, there was a knock at the door. A nurse entered with a cheerful smile, carrying a tray that smelled like heaven. "Good evening, Mrs. Brooks," the nurse said, setting the tray on Samantha's bedside table. "Your husband insisted on ordering from the Italian place down the street instead of hospital food. He said you needed something that would actually give you strength." Samantha's eyes widened as she looked at the tray. Homemade minestrone soup, fresh bread, and what looked like the best lasagna she'd ever seen. Her stomach growled audibly. "Thank you," Nathan said to the nurse, his tone suggesting this was perfectly normal. "Could you give us a few minutes?" When the nurse left, Samantha turned to stare at him. "Mrs. Brooks?" "I had to keep up the story," he said with a shrug. But she could see the blush creeping up his neck. "Besides, you need to eat, and hospital food is terrible. You can't just take care of me like this," Samantha protested, even as she reached for the soup. The first spoonful was warm and perfect, and she had to suppress a moan of pleasure. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because you're a stranger. Because... She paused, searching for the real reason. Because people don't just do this. Not for me. Nathan's expression grew serious. Samantha, can I ask you something? She nodded, still eating the soup like she hadn't seen food in days. What happened to you? Who hurt you so badly that you can't believe someone would want to take care of you? The question hit her like a physical blow, and she set down her spoon with trembling hands. I can't. You don't have to tell me, Nathan said quickly. But I want you to know that whatever happened, it doesn't define you. You're worth caring for. You're worth protecting. Samantha felt tears spill down her cheeks before she could stop them. You don't understand. I've never been enough. Not for my father who left when I was born. Not for my mother's boyfriends who saw me as an inconvenience. Not for Daniel who... She stopped, unable to finish. Who what? Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. Who said I was practice? That I was good enough for now, but not good enough to keep. Not good enough to be seen with in public. Not good enough to take home to his family. The words poured out of her like blood from a wound. He said I was entertaining, but I wasn't wife material. Not for a man like him. Nathan stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Samantha could see his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight with rage. That son of a bitch, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I should have hit him when I had the chance. Nathan, no. Listen to me. He turned back to her, his eyes blazing with an intensity that took her breath away. Everything he said was a lie. You are magnificent, Samantha. You are brilliant and strong and beautiful, and any man who can't see that is blind. You don't know me, she whispered. I know enough. He sat back down, reaching for her hands. I know you're a fighter. I know you're someone who stands up for what's right. I know you're someone who deserves to be loved completely, honestly, and forever. Samantha stared at him, this man who had appeared out of nowhere and was speaking to her like she was precious. Who are you, Nathan Brooks? I'm just a guy who works with his hands and believes in treating people right, he said, squeezing her fingers gently. I'm a guy who thinks you're the most incredible woman he's ever met, and who would like very much to prove to you that good men still exist. I don't date, Samantha said quickly. I can't. I'm not asking you to date me, Nathan said with a gentle smile. I'm asking you to let me be your friend. To let me bring you soup when you're sick and make sure you eat real food. To let me be someone you can count on. Samantha looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Genuine care with no agenda. No expectation of return. This man was offering her friendship with no strings attached, and it terrified her. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Neither do I, Nathan said with a laugh. But maybe we can figure it out together. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the hospital room, something warm, fragile, and precious was beginning to bloom. Samantha didn't know what to call it yet, but for the first time in months, she wasn't facing the future alone. And Nathan Brooks, billionaire CEO pretending to be a simple working man, looked at the woman in the hospital bed and knew his life had just changed forever. Chapter 3. Love's First Whisper. 3 days after her collapse, Samantha was beginning to believe in miracles. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her small apartment, staring at her reflection and hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. For the first time in months, her dark eyes held a spark of something that looked suspiciously like hope. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she smiled before even looking at the screen. She already knew who it was. Nathan. Good morning, beautiful. Did you eat breakfast? Samantha. Good morning to you, too. And yes, I had the eggs and toast you brought yesterday. Nathan. Good. I was thinking about lunch. There's this little soul food place on Colfax that makes the best cornbread in Denver. Want to try it? Samantha's fingers hovered over the phone. In the 3 days since the hospital, Nathan had texted her every morning and evening, brought her groceries, and somehow managed to make her laugh even when she was drowning in work. He was keeping his promise to be her friend. But the way he looked at her made her heart race in ways she hadn't felt in years. Samantha. I'd like that, but I'm paying for my own meal. Nathan. We'll see about that. Samantha. Nathan, I'm serious. I don't want you spending money on me. Nathan, it's just lunch, Samantha. Friends buy each other lunch. She stared at the message, her heart doing that fluttery thing it did whenever he called her his friend. The word should have been safe, comfortable. Instead, it felt like a beautiful lie they were both telling themselves. Samantha. Okay, but somewhere cheap. Nathan, trust me, I know just the place. An hour later, Samantha stood outside Mama Clara's soul food kitchen, watching Nathan walk up the street toward her. He was wearing jeans that had seen better days and a simple button-down shirt that looked like it had come from a thrift store. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd rushed to shower after work, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who worked with his hands. You look beautiful, he said when he reached her, and the way he said it made her believe it might be true. You look like you came straight from a job site, she replied, trying to keep her tone light. Even though her pulse was racing, I did. He held up his hands, showing her the calluses on his palms. Sorry if I smell like sawdust and paint. You smell like honest work, Samantha said, and meant it. I like it. Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, and for a moment, she thought she saw him hesitate. But then he smiled and gestured toward the restaurant. Shall we? Mama Clara gets cranky if people stand around blocking her door. Inside, the restaurant was exactly what Samantha had expected. Checkered tablecloths, mismatched chairs, and the kind of warmth that only came from family recipes and genuine love. The air was thick with the smell of cornbread and collard greens, and Samantha felt her stomach growl in response. Nathan, a large woman with graying hair and a smile that could light up a room, emerged from behind the counter. Baby, where have you been? I haven't seen you in ages. Hey, Mama Clara, Nathan said, accepting a hug that would have crushed a smaller man. I've been busy with work. This is Samantha, the friend I told you about. Mama Clara turned her attention to Samantha, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. So, you're the one who's got our Nathan all twisted up. Girl, you are even prettier than he said. And he's been singing your praises like a man struck by lightning. He has not, Samantha protested, but she could feel her cheeks warming. Oh, honey, yes, he has. Mama Clara laughed, a rich sound that filled the restaurant. He came in here yesterday asking what kind of food would help a woman recover her strength, talking about how you've been working too hard and not eating enough. That man is completely smitten. Mama Clara, Nathan said, his voice carrying a warning that only made the older woman laugh harder. Don't you Mama Clara me, boy. I've been watching you for 3 years, and I've never seen you bring a woman in here. This one must be special. Samantha felt her heart skip as she glanced at Nathan. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Something tender and vulnerable that made her want to reach out and touch his face. She is special, he said quietly, and the words hit her like a physical caress. Mama Clara seated them at a corner table, close enough that their knees brushed when they settled down. Samantha tried to focus on the menu, but she was acutely aware of Nathan beside her. The way he tapped his fingers rhythmically on the table when thinking, the way he kept stealing glances at her, as if ensuring she was really there. So, what's good here? She asked, attempting to break the tension. Everything, Nathan said. But the fried chicken is legendary, and the mac and cheese is. He paused, closing his eyes and making a sound that was almost sinful. It should probably be illegal in several states. Samantha laughed, and the sound surprised her. When had she last laughed like that, light, free, and completely uninhibited? I'll have the fried chicken then, she decided. And the mac and cheese, that's probably illegal. Make that too, Nathan called to Mama Clara, who was already heading toward the kitchen. And cornbread, Mama Clara called back. Extra butter for the skinny girl. When they were alone again, Nathan reached across the table and touched Samantha's hand. You doing okay? You seemed tense walking in here. Better now, she said, realizing it was true. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Good. You needed it. His thumb traced gentle circles on her knuckles. Can I ask you something? Sure. What made you want to be a lawyer? Samantha was quiet for a moment, surprised by the question. My mother, she said finally. She was gorgeous, the kind of beautiful that stops traffic. But she was also poor, black, and young. Men took advantage of that. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. When I was 7, she started dating this man, Charles Rutherford. He was wealthy, sophisticated, everything she'd ever dreamed of. He swept her off her feet, promised her the moon. Samantha's voice grew bitter. He moved us into his mansion, bought us nice clothes, made us feel like we finally belonged. What happened? I happened. Samantha pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. I was too dark for his social circle, too obviously not his biological daughter. His friends started making comments, asking questions. So he gave my mother an ultimatum, him or me. Jesus, Nathan breathed. She chose me. Of course she chose me, but not before he'd already destroyed her sense of self-worth. He'd made her dependent on him, cut her off from her friends, convinced her she was nothing without him. When we left, she had nothing, no money, no job skills, no confidence. That's why you became a lawyer, Nathan said, understanding. I swore I'd never be powerless like that, never be at someone else's mercy. I'd make my own way, fight for women who couldn't fight for themselves. Samantha looked down at her hands. Fat lot of good it did me. I still ended up married to a man who saw me as a temporary amusement. No, Nathan said firmly. You ended up divorcing a man who wasn't worth your time. There's a difference. Before Samantha could respond, Mama Clara appeared with their food. The table was suddenly covered with plates of golden fried chicken, creamy mac and cheese, perfectly seasoned collard greens, and cornbread that looked like it had been blessed by angels. Eat up, babies, Mama Clara said, but her eyes were on Nathan. And Nathan, you make sure this girl gets plenty. She's too skinny. Yes, ma'am, Nathan said solemnly. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Nathan told her about his work, carefully vague stories about construction jobs and difficult clients. Samantha found herself relaxing, laughing at his stories, enjoying the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with someone who actually listened when she talked. This is incredible, she said, taking another bite of the mac and cheese. I think I'm in love with the mac and cheese. With the mac and cheese? Nathan asked, but there was something in his voice that made her look up. With the mac and cheese, she confirmed, but their eyes met across the table and held. Good, he said quietly, because I think I'm in love too. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that had nothing to do with food. Samantha felt her heart start to race, felt that familiar flutter of panic when things got too real, too fast. Nathan, I'm not talking about the mac and cheese, he said, his voice gentle but determined. I'm talking about the way you tilt your head when you're thinking, the way you light up when you laugh, the way you fight for what's right, even when it costs you everything. You don't know me, Samantha whispered,